Okay, welcome back. This is episode 3 of Behind the Business, where I do a weekly check-in with myself to reflect on goals, talk about what went well, what didn't go well, and some of my predictions around the process of creating and managing an ASMR channel from the ground up. So let's go ahead and just jump into this. 2 weeks ago was my complete disaster week where everything it seemed like that could go wrong went wrong. And last week, I think, was an experience of the culmination of a lot of trial and error as well as growth, which is really exciting. Hang on, I gotta pause here. When did this get here? There's a hair tie. Okay. Refocusing here now that we found that. So, this past week went really well. Let's get into why. So, first of all, one of my predictions that I had for the last week. Actually, let's back up. Big goals. I started this ASMR channel because I wanted to know what the experience was like of creating and managing a channel. I wanted to know, was this something that was actually enjoyable as I had hoped it was in my mind? And if it's something that I did enjoy, is it something that could be turned into a bit of a side hustle, some sort of creative process that also potentially gets monetized? So my goal in starting this channel was to, as quickly as possible, answer the question of what is it like to create and run an ASMR channel and all of the various different aspects of it. Does that yield a net positive in terms of my creative fulfillment and my personal enjoyment, and potentially someday, does it provide some sort of monetary kickback? So that's what I wanted to know, and that was why I started this channel, to answer that question. So that's the immediate goal, as well as the sort of short near-term goal. So yeah, that's the near-term goal for that. More broadly speaking, my intention, if this got to a certain level, was to figure out if it's possible, and what that looks like again, to do custom ASMR where folks could actually submit ideas, ask for specific things, pay for specific videos, where it's something tailored to that person and the triggers they do or don't like, and make a narrative that's just for them. So that's one of the big long-term goals. And then another thing that I realized I haven't talked about here is this idea in my head of care packages that also would be paired with some sort of video, where folks could opt into like a monthly, or maybe this is like a quarterly little care package, and they get the stuff in the mail that then they get to see a video on. And so it's this sort of like pairing of, you get the virtual with the at-home experience. And this, I'm saying this out loud, it reminds me a lot of during the pandemic, where the people would send like cooking kits and then you would watch along with the chef and cook the meal. So it's kind of like that. That's like the long-term vision of, I would like to get to a point to be able to do that. So that's the now, and that's the far. So let's dive into it then, officially, of how the last week went, how I'm working towards at least those near-term goals, because those questions have to be answered first, and talk about some predictions, talk about some goals for the past week that I had, talk about what I'd like to keep doing, as well as some new things to try, and then just some general reflections on how the week went, and some things that we learned, and some things that came up, because this was an interesting week. Okay. First of all, some predictions going into this week. One, my prediction that I was going to still overextend myself in terms of scheduling. I'm happy to report I didn't do that. However, I think it was a bit of luck and chance. So, yay, we didn't burn out. We didn't have to take a week off and not touch this for a while. But I don't know that it will always work that way. So I don't know if it's sustainable, and that's something that's really important to me as we go forward in this process. So plus one and also neutral one. How do I figure this out to be sustainable? So, second prediction, sitting where you see me here now is not sustainable in the long run for my comfort, for my ability to focus. I love the background that you get here, and I'm sitting on the floor at a coffee table. Normally that's okay, but I realized that when I was doing videos here, it was something that was detracting from my ability to create videos that I was enjoying and stay focused. And when then something would go wrong, I was extra frustrated because then I'm a little bit cramped up or stretched in a way that was uncomfortable. So sitting is not going to work out. And that was 100% true, which if you've watched some of the videos in last week, you've probably noticed there's less of this background that we have here, and there's some new backgrounds. And that has been way better to not be sitting on the floor at a coffee table. I would still like to use this background, but sitting was not sustainable, and switching to not sitting on the floor or standing was a much better choice. And I really enjoyed that, and it felt like it allowed me to focus much better. So good observation on my part. Definitely improved, I think, the overall enjoyment and satisfaction of doing this. So great. Okay, that I think wraps up the predictions that I had. Like I said, it's really contributing to those two goals of how do we create a sustainable production process for myself, and how do we do that both in a like cognitively, creatively, as well as a physically sustainable way. Great. Cool. Let's double check this here. Okay, so just reiterating then, my immediate goals then, continue to work towards sort of on a week by week basis, is again, sustainable production. New goal kind of unlocked from honestly the last couple days is around editing, because when I started this channel, again, in light of trying to answer the question as quickly as possible of, do I enjoy the process of this? Do I enjoy the routine of posting? Do I enjoy the experience of the feedback and the numbers and having something out there on the internet? To answer that question as quickly as possible, I have done pretty much no editing. I have not gotten picky about the sound quality very much, or the visuals or anything. It's really just a one take, do it and be done and post it and see what that experience is like. I feel like after 3 weeks of doing this, I have gotten to a point where I feel comfortable enough with the process and comfortable enough with the tech. I won't say it's 100%, but just enough comfortable with all the different aspects that now I feel like I have the brain capacity to say, okay, how could I do a little bit of editing? What is that like? So that's a now goal, is to continue practicing just a little bit of editing, even if that's just cutting out any sort of sound blips that get really loud, maybe playing a little bit more with creating a visual that is separate from the audio aspect and merging them together. They're very small tasks, very easy, very straightforward. It's just the mental effort of doing that I'm not sure I want to do that, and or maybe just not right now. So finding small ways to continue learning more about editing and figuring out what actually floats my boat with that. Lastly, going into next week, I really, really would like to get to a place where I'm happy with the audio quality. And I don't think that that's going to happen in the physical space that I'm in, because of where I live. There's just way too much traffic noise, and there are very, very limited hours where the traffic noise is almost nothing, not quite, never is completely silent. And there are no hours of the day that then overlap with that where some electronic is not running. So the fridge, the cat feeder, the central heating is going on. There's always something that is creating background noise. And I would like to know, how much more do I enjoy or do I not enjoy if I can actually produce audio quality that is something that I would really be excited to listen to, because right now I'm not there. So that's something I think I'm going to experiment with in the coming week, is figuring out, can I go to the local library and book a room for an hour? can I go to a friend's place who has a really quiet house and just sit somewhere and try and record for 20 minutes? That kind of ties into the idea of recording audio separate from the visual, because then it would be easier to just go sit somewhere, get the audio cut, and then go back and do the visuals somewhere else and not have to worry about the sound space. So that's the immediate goal, because I think if I can't get the audio quality to something that I personally enjoy, I'm not sure how long I'm going to want to keep doing this, because I think that will frustrate me and or really just not fulfill me in a creative aspect if there is this continuous background noise that's happening. So those are my like near-term goals. I don't think I'm going to find an answer to that in the next week, but that's what I want to try to work more towards. So that is that. Okay, great. So touching on then some things that I want to keep doing and then some new things to try. I've already talked a little bit about this. Number one, managing the gain on the microphone. Like I said, this goes back to the audio quality. I want something that's really crisp and really clean and like that, just wonderful dead silence paired with sound. I can't get it here, and I'm trying to by compensating with the gain. It's not working. And that's where audio issues come in, is when I try to make the gain higher. That's when really weird things tend to start happening that I can't seem to figure out why they're happening, other than the gain is higher. So we got to keep it where I've set it for now, unless we go to a new space, and then we might try something different. Already mentioned this, continuing to sit at a table or stand, that worked really well. No talking videos, 100% better than the talking videos. I did not realize how exhausting and also how focus breaking that is, to be constantly trying to talk or do like whispered sounds, like whispered talking. I don't know how, for example, Joyceful Tingles, who does rapid fire, like almost continuous whispering, chatting at you, like how? It is exhausting when I do this for 20 minutes. Like, this is just insane to me that she can make so many videos just so consistently at that level of energy. Personally, I find it really exhausting. So no talking and or very slow paced to limited talking is much more sustainable for me. So that, at least for now, is where we're going to go. At some point, I would like to try like a Joyceful Tingles style where it is rapid fire, continuous. That will be interesting. Probably a very short video for starters. But another thing that I didn't write down here is that with last week's schedule, I totally made this up. I didn't stick to the schedule. I really enjoyed doing a few longer form videos that was more of a story and more of a narrative. But I really enjoyed these like 10 to 15 minute videos that were really just sampling sounds and playing with them to see what could be created. Those are really enjoyable. So I'd like to continue doing more of those. And I think at some point there will be enough of a repertoire of those sounds that then could kind of get built into some sort of story if I felt like I wanted to do that. But for now, that's been a nice way to balance the quantity that I've been producing with also enjoying that and feeling like it's still creative and exploratory. A couple more obvious things, perhaps. Going back and listening to the entire video before posting. Learned the hard way of where I listened to, I think it was 20 minutes of like a 25-minute video. It was great. It was fine. And then somewhere around the 23-minute mark, massive audio surge. I don't know what it was, electrical, static, something. Didn't sound good. Didn't catch it. And so somebody in the comments pointed it out and it was like, ooh, yeah, that is awful. I would bail so hard on that. So listen to the entire audio. I don't care so much about the visuals at the moment, but make sure the audio is at least not horribly, horribly bombastic. Yeah, great. That covers the things I want to keep doing. I already touched on the things to try for this week, but I'll just reiterate them. That again, wanting to focus on trying to find a quieter soundscape. So at least looking into what does it mean to go book a room at the local library, as well as how can I learn a little bit more about editing. And then this will kind of segue into some of the reflections that I've had for the week. I feel like I have now learned enough about YouTube, the algorithms, the process, and a little bit more about their business model, where I'm a little disillusioned. So, somebody else also pointed out in the comments that ads are getting slapped willy nilly. For example, their experience was an ad pops up 1 minute into the video. And as somebody who is intentionally trying to create content that is meant to play with sound and silence in an intentional way to calm people down, what the hell? I did not think ads were going to show up, at least for a while. Again, my miscalculation. But man, it is frustrating to know that people who don't have premium, which I don't know what percentage of people that is that are listening, are just getting slapped with ads wherever. And as a channel creator, I have no control over that until I become a YouTube paid partner, which, and this is what kills me, to become a YouTube paid partner, you have to have a mix of numbers of hours watched, and I forget the number off the top of my head, but it's total number of hours watched of your content by the public, so meaning not yourself, and you have to have a certain subscriber count, which, if you don't have premium and you're watching a new small channel who doesn't have control over ad placements and when that's happening, and I'm guessing the quality, at least speaking for myself, the quality is not super high of the videos to start with. If you're getting slapped with an ad 1 minute into a video, do you know how fast I would bail on that? Like, I would not stick around, which means A, I'm not subscribing because that's frustrating, and B, the hours watched, that's gonna not happen because, well, I'm not watching videos that are getting ads slapped willy-nilly wherever. Like when I put on ASMR, I want to set it and forget it and go to sleep, not have a random ad interrupt it 1 minute, 3 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever. And I've personally experienced this with other small content creators where it's super frustrating, and now I understand why that happens, because there's no control. So this is the trade-off of being a content creator on YouTube, is that they do the advertising, quote, for free. They put it in front of people's eyeballs. They get the attraction and attention to it. And you have no control about when they're putting on advertising. So that was a bit of a slap in the face. And I'm still kind of mulling over my thoughts on that, and if this is a good platform that I want to be using for that, if it's worth it, and really, like, how does or doesn't that work with what I had hoped for in terms of the experience of this. And I don't know that I have a good answer at the moment. So what does that mean about where I want to go with that, given how YouTube ads really, in my opinion, really negatively impact small creators? Number one, another goal that I have for this upcoming week is to try to learn a little bit more about what are tactics for overcoming this, and to understand a little bit better about what is the black box of YouTube and how to maybe work with it, at least as far as people understand now. Secondarily, right now my understanding is the only way to get around that is to basically get to the point of being a paid partner as fast as possible so that you can get control of where ads are placed. And now I want to clarify, I do need to double check that actually is true, that if you get to become a paid partner, do you have a say of like only ads at the end, only ads at the beginning? I do know that you can just click like don't monetize this, meaning ads are not shown at all. Asterisk, I need to look that up to confirm that is 100% true. Because I think if there's not ad control, that really pivots my strategy and what I want out of creating these videos, and whether or not it's something that I feel is actually useful or valuable to post versus just to make for my own enjoyment. So with that in mind, my current contemplation, probably for the next week or so, is should my new goal be to figure out how do we fast track getting eyeballs on the videos for as long as possible, i.e., getting to that hours watched count, and how do we get people to subscribe? And the answer that's coming to mind, which I don't know how I feel about it, is to do things that are reactionary and or inflammatory, i.e., weird ass titles, trying to have clickbaity kind of clip art images, dressing and performing in certain ways that attracts an audience to want to click on it and potentially stick around. And how do you make it very sticky to brains and eyes? And I don't know if that's something that feels particularly good to do. We're going to have to try it if that's where we decide to go. It also, from a branding perspective, I kind of hate that you have to remold your brand to what gets you the view count and the subscriber count high enough to be monetized, to control ads, and then to say, hey, actually, I'm entirely rebranding the reason why most of you subscribed or clicked on this in the first place. Like, we're just throwing that out the window and going back to kind of the homey, cozy, whimsical thing that we were doing. I don't know. It feels very gamified and like very transactional. But maybe that is what is required to get to what I want. And if it is, I'm going to have to see how I feel about it along the way. So, yeah, I think that mostly covers this week's reflections. The last thing I'll say, which was a prediction from a few weeks ago, is that the metrics and now the comments of YouTube were going to be something that we're going to be psychologically potentially challenging to handle. And I will say this kind of came out full force in the past week where people started commenting. And in my head, the ASMR space of YouTube was kind of cozy, chill, friendly, like happy vibes, you know? Forgot, the internet is the internet, and so people are going to act how they want. So there were some very pointed comments that were good feedback. I will acknowledge that. I didn't like them. I didn't like how they were phrased. And that is 100% my responsibility then to figure out how to manage my own emotions around that. And I think it was definitely a reminder that that's going to happen and that I need to keep that in mind and be ready for that when I step into, I'm reading comments and I'm responding to things and I'm considering the overall effects of this on me, because I wasn't ready for that. I stepped into it thinking like, oh great, there's some nice cute cozy comments. No, people were giving honest pointed feedback in a way that was how they were feeling in that moment, and that surprised me. So yeah, in addition to the YouTube metrics and the numbers, also just a reminder to myself that people are going to behave how they behave on the internet. And that's up to me to manage my own emotions around that and to remember that there's value in some of those comments that I maybe don't like and that they provide useful feedback. So, all right. I think that wraps up what I was hoping to reflect on for this past week. My goals going into next week, they could be more specific and more actionable. At the moment, I don't feel particularly compelled to pin those down, at least here today. I like kind of floating along, and I know that that's maybe less productive than it could be, but that's the direction we're going to go in for this week of looking into what it means to record in the library, learn a little bit more about editing, learn a little bit more about small channels overcoming the challenges of brother YouTube. And again, to keep working towards that sustainable creation and figure out if that feels okay along the way. So, alrighty. Thanks again if you did listen to the entire episode here and or if you've been following along for a few of these here. I do appreciate that. As always, I think I'm curious what stood out for you from what I chatted about. Are you on a process yourself in terms of creating your own channel or considering it? And if so, where are you at and what's coming up for you? I would be curious to kind of get a conversation going with that, because like I said, I don't feel like that there is a ton of this on the internet, and or I feel like it is a little bit gatekept. So feel free to jump in the comments if there are things that you would potentially like to chat about or even hear more about. So alrighty, thanks again, and have a good week. I will see you next week if you come back.